plant. Let's look at symptoms. Symptoms are an expression of a disease as a response to the activities of the pathogen. Plant responds by giving us changes in morphology, and when we get the change in morphology, we get the symptom that is so often characteristic of a particular kind of disease. When we look at symptoms, there are two basic categories of symptoms. One is necrotic. You see the prefix necro. This means death. When we look at necrotic symptoms, we are seeing death of tissues, and that gives us quite an indication of what's going on. The most common type you get are what we're going to call leaf spots. There are a lot of common types of leaf spots out there. And what they look like is, as it says, these are spots on leaves. And there are many different pathogens that will give you spots on leaves, but these are very characteristic spots. You can see down here we've got a different type of spot, and a lot of different plants show different kinds of leaf spot. We have got what we call a blotch. A blotch is kind of like a leaf spot, but only it's on a thicker kind of material. In this particular case, it is looking at an apple. Necrotic types, we talk about a blight. A blight is much more extensive than a leaf spot, and a blight, normally we're talking about it attacking a meristem, and when it does that, it does a lot of damage. You can see this blight here. We can have a scorch. A scorch, just like it says, looks like it was burnt, often by hot water or something like that. In this particular case, you can see how this looks like it's been scorched. We can have a canker, and a canker is nothing more than a type of spot, but it's on a thick tissue. And over here you can see this particular tree is showing this canker. It's got a change in the morphology on the outside. It looked all distorted on the outside, and when you cut it open, you see all this dark mass on the inside. It's quite a problem on these particular trees. We can talk about rots. Rot means something is going away. There are two types of rots. One is a dry rot, and with the dry rot, basically everything becomes dry. We can see something like this, and this is a sweet potato, and you can see the dry rot, and it seems to be drying up on there. It's no longer functional. We can have a wet rot where things liquefy. In this particular case, you can see this apple with this wet rot on the outside of it. You can see how the pathogen has liquefied the apple. This is a strawberry, and you can see how the pathogen is getting in there, and it is destroying it. It's becoming a very wet sort of material, and these get to be very soggy. We have what we call a wilt. And in a wilt, the plant loses turgor due to many different reasons. A wilt would look something like this, where you can see the plant is unable to keep its water relations together, and it's just falling apart, and it is totally non-functional at this point. We have mummification. And mummification often occurs on certain types of fruits where you get a rotting of it. It is such a rot that it all dries down and it turns into this very nasty looking mummy. This will conserve the pathogen from one year to the next. Another type of rot we might talk about is a bleeding. This is also called slime flux. What you get is an accumulation of moisture on the inside, and as you do that, the pathogen gets in and it starts to rot this out from the inside. You can have a lot of these occurring where you had a limb that is rotted away on a larger type tree. We have gummosis, and this is where you get the formation of gums. You can see on this particular peach, you've got gum being formed on the outside of it. This is a common sort of symptomology depending on the type of fruit. We have resinosis, and this is the release of resins. This is on a pine tree, and you can see these resins just dripping off, and it's rather nasty looking, but it's a interesting sort of rotting where you're getting a release of resin. We have a very specialized type of rotting, which is called damping off. This is a very problematic disease because you get the seed being decayed when it's first coming up, which means the plant's not going to survive. If it does survive, you will get transmission of the pathogen to other roots on other plants, and you will get a root rot like this out of it. What you get in the field looks like this, where you've got a whole area that it seems the seeds never made it up out of the ground because they rotted away because of a pathogen that would have been on the seed. So therefore, it is quite problematic.